Good evening, members and guests, and welcome to the Book Club of California's presentation for Monday, November 14th, 2022. It's great to see people here in the book club rooms again, so thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Tonight, we present the publication launch for the book club's 242nd book. The book is titled The Thunderbolt and the Monk. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director for the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all tonight. For those of you, no applause needed, thank you. For those of you who are new to us, either here in the room or out there on Zoom, because we do have a Zoom audience this evening, the Book Club of California is a nonprofit, member and donor supported organization that is dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes we do that with a focus on the history and the literature of California and the West. Many of you know that the book club publishes finely made limited edition books, a scholarly journal, and keepsakes. And we host a year-round series of exhibitions and programs like the one this evening on topics including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, and much, much more. So if you're interested in what we do, please consider joining our century-long tradition. If you're not a member, or if your membership has lapsed, I strongly encourage you to consider membership. Our dues are modest, but the benefits are many, and we simply can't do the work we do without the support of our members. So please visit us online at bccbooks.org. And now for tonight's celebration of our newest publication. Are you ready to go?
I was born ready.
You were born ready. We love that. Great. On with the celebration of our newest publication, The Thunderbolt and the Monk. Tonight, you're going to hear from Nancy Stock Allen, the author and book designer, and John Demerit, the bookbinder for the deluxe edition of the publication. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them now, and then they'll come up to the podium. Nancy Stock Allen earned an MFA from Cranbrook Academy of Art and has worked in design firms and museums in New York and Philadelphia. For 2 decades, she taught as a full professor at Moore College of Art and Design. Her previous book was Carol Twombly, her brief but brilliant career in type design. A letterpress printer, her next project is a letterpress translation of French documents that record the role of women typesetters in 19th century France. Now, John Demerit owns and operates John Demerit Bookbinding in Emeryville, California. His studio produces books and portfolios for artists, galleries, fine press publishers, and institutions. He has taught and lectured at the San Francisco Center for the Book, the Kala Institute, Columbia College Center for Book and Paper. There's so many on this list, I can't read them all. The Oregon College of Arts and Craft, and the San Francisco Art Institute, among many, many others. John is currently the co-president of the Colophon Club. He and his wife, Nora Powles, publish collaborative projects with artists under their imprint, Demerit Powles Editions. Now, of course, we have the book on display here at the front of the room. We have the standard edition and the deluxe edition here for you. It is available for purchase. If you're interested, you can see me after the presentation. And if you've already purchased the book, you can pick it up tonight before you leave. We should have time for questions after the presentations, and we'll do our best to take questions and comments from the Zoom audience, as well as from those here in the club rooms. And now, it's my great pleasure to welcome to the podium, Nancy Stock Allen.
Hi, everyone. If I sound a little breathless and raspy, I've just gotten over an upper respiratory something I got from my 2-year-old granddaughter. If any of you have grandchildren, you probably had the same thing. So just bear with me. I'm going to try to get through this as well as I can. Speak up louder. Okay. How about, is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better in the microphone? Yeah, I know. I'm really muffled sounding because of this also. All right. I'd like to have you start by thinking back to a teacher or a mentor who had a profound effect upon you. Perhaps they shook up your view of the world, or they inspired you to change your career path? That is the way that these two men, that's the kind of effect that they have, two calligraphy teachers at Reed College, on their students. Lloyd Reynolds, on the right, was hired to teach English and literature, but he developed a deep interest in calligraphy. He practiced and studied until he was quite accomplished and began offering calligraphy classes in the college art department. Now, is anybody here academic?
Recovering?
Yeah, I am also recovering. I just think the whole idea of being from someone from the liberal arts department walking in and teaching a class in the studio department, wherever I taught, would have been like a small nuclear explosion. Yeah. So he had this kind of personality that he was able to do these kinds of things. Reynolds became a calligraphy teaching machine. He taught evening classes at the Portland Museum of Art. He taught Saturday morning classes to elementary school children, summer classes to high school teachers. He even filmed 20 episodes of handwriting instruction on public television that ran over 12 times. You're shaking your head, yes. Are you a Portlander? A reader?
There's a few readies.
Oh, okay. I'm going to be
These are
calling.
two readies right
I'm going to be calling on you all. Okay. So would I be right in saying that he single-handedly built a community of calligraphers in the Portland area? I see another head shaking in the background. Like thousands of calligraphers in the Portland area based on this one person's teaching. When he retired from Reed, he handpicked Robert Palladino to replace him. Palladino had just spent 2 decades as a Trappist monk in a silent monastery. He taught for 15 years until the art department voted to remove calligraphy from the course offerings. It was a very unpopular decision. Okay. Is anyone here someone who studied under Reynolds or Palladino or studied under teacher? I mean, I would love to have firsthand account because, you know, I only have second. And Palladino unfortunately died just a few years before I started working on this book. Otherwise, I would have had a chance. Time to change this slide.
Keep it,
Sorry.
the keep it, and then.
I wasn't born that ready. Oh, that's all I have to do?
Now you can use it.
All right, all right. Here Reynolds is holding his personal symbol, the Thunderbolt, hence the title of the book. It represents the moment of profound insight and understanding that Reynolds hoped to achieve and to inspire in others. Reynolds had, let's see if I get this. Reynolds had such a moment of insight while reading Edward Johnston's Writing, Lettering, and Illuminating. It was Johnston's approach to teaching from a base of historical styles that struck a chord with Reynolds. And you can see, I don't know, how many are you familiar with this book? But yeah, it's a classic, many people have used it. You know, what's interesting is that Reynolds was self-taught, but so was Edward Johnston self-taught. So it's like a self-taught person teaching a self-taught person. Reynolds became an avid student of paleography, the study of ancient writing systems. And you can see him here working through the development of the letter A. And he did this with every letter, and he had handouts for the students in the classes. Yeah, he did a lot of teaching of this too. The letter style that most interested Reynolds was the italic, due to its clarity and readability. He did not believe in pretty letters. He believed that letters were a conduit for the information to go from the writer to the reader. He started working on his own exercise manuals, books, and held many exhibitions at the college. He advertised italic in every possible way, including on his old Mercedes. Now, maybe you read people will be happy to see the next part. I have a clip here from a PBS series called Men Who Teach. It highlighted important, okay, I guess there were no women who taught at that time, but it highlighted important and influential professors across the country. It features Reynolds near the end of his career. So I'm going to run this and it will describe to you what the Reed environment was like in the late 60s. Reynolds is talking about his feelings about teaching. And also we get to see him do a little calligraphy, which is always really fascinating.
The founders of Reed College understood that liberty is conditional, but that freedom is a specific. It exists or it does not exist. Academic freedom exists at Reed College for the student and for the teacher. This freedom has given them, among other things, a higher proportion of graduates receiving PhDs than any other school in the country. Professor Lloyd Reynolds is world famous for his craft, which is calligraphy. But in his profession, which is teaching, he is more than famous. He's a kind of hero. For his insights and his capacity for genuine enthusiasm take him and his students far outside the normal curriculum, which he knows cannot wholly satisfy the needs of an average student. He fights its irrelevance in his own singular way, and those lucky enough to be his students discover they have made a friend for life.
There's a regular class structure in education filled with snobbery and self-deceit. If a student is a graduate student, then he's good. If he's going to teach in college and doesn't get a PhD, well, then he's kind of phony. But if he's only a high school teacher, well, who needs to help high school teachers? Oh, they're babysitters, and they're too dumb to learn anything anyhow. This lack of respect for the teacher is at the root of the whole problem. And this is one thing I'm proud about Reed, is that we take the teachers seriously and really try to help them. Now, a private school like Reed, you see, kicks over the traces, does unconventional things, and if the student's going there, he's not swelling the class in one of these required courses in the state system. So they fight us all the time. If we get students at all, it's because of the quality of what we're offering, not because it's easy for them. And we have been able to do all kinds of things that have never done in any college. And this is why I love the place. And I'd have been a rhino or bum probably, except for me. I could not teach at a state institution. They wouldn't endure the things I do. I'm always over the traces, going into completely new fields and working entirely on the basis of the insights and where they lead me. A freshman astonished me by saying some years ago, he said, when I was doing a sign, said, "Do you really do those letters?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "But they look so official." And I told him, "Of course they looked official. The whole Roman Empire stood behind letters like that." Teachers are constantly telling me about how some child is far more responsible after he's been introduced to this hand in our elementary schools in this area and in the high schools. But I really can see a reason why the children would like this. They find that they actually can, with in a very short time, write a hand that looks very official, in the words of this boy. It doesn't look like something done with a ballpoint pen or a pencil. It doesn't look like a childish substitute for sophisticated letters. They are sophisticated letters. And when a child discovers how easy it is, generally he wants to learn to do it. And it helps his reading, it helps his spelling, it helps his written.
So yeah, he was a big advocate of teaching, especially young children.
Founders of Reed.
I went to Reed in 2019 to do research for the book. Once there, I discovered there had been a revival of sorts of the calligraphy program. Due to alumni and student interest, the gallery was sponsoring non-credit classes 2 nights a week at no charge and open to all Reed students and faculty and staff. And I'd like to point out Gregory McNaughton in the foreground is the director. He works for the gallery. He studied under Robert Palladino and also Jackie Svarin. Are any calligraphers here? So you might know the name Jackie Svarin. She just passed away this year. He worked with her up until then. There's plenty of evidence of classwork displayed around the college. In the admissions office, this is a formal piece that's done by a physics major. Yeah, there is no calligraphy major. It's just somebody who took the random classes. There's lots of informal work posted around the campus. So could you describe what the scrounge table is?
Tradition of people who were not on the meal plan, waiting near where you would kind of finish your meal and drop off your plates. And they would wait for unfinished meals and they would ask if you were done with that. Are you done with that? Was the traditional scrounger question. So people would often take a little extra food to make sure it's effective. So hence the scrounge commandments. There are certain behavioral norms that have to be enforced in a situation like that, where it becomes chaos.
Right.
But
So
the weathergrams, I think, are the more interesting thing.
yeah, do you want to speak about those a little bit also? What do you understand the weathergrams to be?
Ephemeral poetry to be written on tags of paper and hung in places where people would see it or experience the wind blowing it. I don't know if it was drawn from another tradition or something that he invented, or I've seen them elsewhere.
Yeah, it's there's sort of a Japanese tradition that's very similar to that, but it was a Zen poem to be written on a piece of, had to be brown grocery store bag, cut to a certain size with a hole in it. And it was hung on the equinox or the solstice and the opposite. Yeah. And it was funny because I was there in the summertime and the Portland calligraphy community was having a national convention there. And they had 250 of these things hanging around the campus. But would you normally just see them around the campus?
They had really died out.
Oh, when you were there.
During our era. Yeah,
You don't remember
I'm
them
aware-
either?
I'm aware of the kind of revival that happened. Starting
When were
in the
you there?
90s. Yeah,
When were you there?
I was there in the late 80s. So kind of in the-
Right
sort of the
after,
nadir
right
in a
after,
sense.
yeah.
It's like the bottom of this, yeah.
I was in the early 80s. I don't remember that at all. Sorry.
But early 90s, remember, seems like.
Well, there are about 3 pages of instructions how to make one of these things in the book, if you ever want to make one. One permanent reminder of the old calligraphy program is a stone engraving over some of the buildings. These were cut by Father Edward Kadich, who was brought to the college by Lloyd Reynolds to cut the letters and teach workshops. There he is cutting the letters and working on a workshop. When Reynolds decided to retire, he suggested that his successor, Palladino, study under Kadich for a year to prepare to leave a community like this. And that is Father Palladino at Our Lady of Guadalupe, right outside of Portland. He was in that, as I said, for about 2 decades, a silent community, only got to speak 1 day a year. To change to being in a community like this is where he's teaching at Reed College. Yeah, it's kind of like kind of a big jump. Palladino had many students over his 15 years of teaching, but the one most associated with him is Steve Jobs. They had a cordial teacher-student relationship, and Jobs occasionally consulted with Palladino about letter forms for the Met. Palladino never used a computer in his life. But Jobs gave Palladino's class the credit for inspiring him to prioritize beautiful letter forms on his computer. Unfortunately, media and outlets love to romanticize the monk angle more than the actual student-teacher relationship. I have a little clip that illustrates that in this movie. Let's see if we can get it to work. Take a look at this work she does.
Yeah, the teacher's this monk or something. Yeah, Robert Palladino. Totally inspiring.
So, okay, like if Reynolds and Palladino could see this as being held up as an example, they would be rolling in their proverbial graves. Because like I said in the beginning, it was all about clarity and getting the information from the writer to the reader, and not, especially the one that they showed before, it was so much stuff going on, you couldn't even see the letters in there at all. Even the Catholic Sentinel got excited about having a priest in a movie and did an article about it. And that little cut in on the bottom is the actor who played Palladino. And just like what was really ironic is that they had him lecturing about Garamond, the typeface, which is like, okay. They're off on every single possible thing that they could do. Even when Palladino died, he was written up in the New York Times obituary, which is a big deal for a college professor. But he had once said to Gregory McNaughton, the director of the program that I mentioned earlier, "I don't want to be only remembered as the man who taught the man who ended handwriting." It kind of became his. And we see the story is also in the Hollywood Reporter. And I tried to get a copy of Steve Jobs' handwriting. I thought, wouldn't it be really interesting to see if he had really cool italic handwriting, but it wasn't to be had. What this person used to illustrate the article was some handwriting by a gentleman named Tim Gervin, who was an informal student. He was not a Reed student. He was an informal student of Reynolds. And Tim Gervin went on to a very commercial kind of life with his calligraphy. His first big break was the title for the film Apocalypse Now. And he's gone on to do about 400 other titles, one big one, The Matrix, and some of these other ones. He also has done many, many products, which you would recognize. Everybody eats kettle potato chips, okay, give it up. And then also a lot of entertainment things. But a lot of the students stayed in the lane of italic. They continued to do it themselves. They taught italic, and they published their own books about italic handwriting, many of them for children. Others went into digital typography, which is a new technology in the 1970s and 1980s. If you have Apple Chancery on your computer, that is a design that was done based on Lloyd Reynolds italic by two former Reed students who became digital type designers.
Bigelow and Holmes.
Yes, that's by Bigelow and Holmes.
They were friends here 30 years ago.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, they attributed a lot of what they've written to Lloyd Reynolds being inspired by him. He actually wrote, Chuck Bigelow wrote that A-Type I conference, and he mentions, were you there? Yeah.
84, I met all of them.
And he mentions Lloyd Reynolds a lot right in the beginning. He must have been an incredible personality. I mean, the things that he could do, and well, you see him talk, you know, he has a certain energy that projects.
What was his specialty in English? When he taught, he had an interest.
Well, I will say, I had this at the end, but he had three. He loved William Shakespeare, William Blake, and William Morris. And so we'll have a little discussion about that in a minute. So we did Apple Chancery. Yes, that was Bigelow and Holmes. And then Sumner Stone, who studied under Lloyd Reynolds. And also he studied under Herman Zoff at Hallmark. But he became the first type director at Adobe. And his work there set a standard of high quality, one which surpassed most of the previous digital type. When his Adobe original team, you can see Robert Slimbuck and Carol Twombly there, that was the team, just the three of them, released their first typefaces. we art directors, because I was an art director and a professor of typography, we stopped using the type houses. It was a huge shift in the change of the way the type was produced. So he had a lot to do with it. I think everyone was waiting for type to get to the quality of where it could be used in books. And that's what happened when he was at Adobe. So it was kind of a no-brainer to use Sumner's Cycles superfamily for the text in the book, and also his Devonte for the initial caps and some of the headlines. And then here they are in action. I tried to follow as much as I could the golden portion for the book. It was it's a traditional calligraphy, a manuscript layout, an early book layout, but it was also something that Reynolds emphasized a lot. So I felt it would be important to use that. And I was really happy that book club let me get away with those big wide margins, because I don't know if anybody else would let me do that. And as I mentioned before, he had 3 heroes: William Morris, William Blake, and William Shakespeare. So for the special edition, we wanted to include some real calligraphy, not just pictures of calligraphy, but actual produced calligraphy. And we were able to get 3 calligraphers to do that work on some small broadsides. And we were looking for quotes, and this one from William Morris seemed really appropriate because it's about what Reynolds was, teaching from the past and passing it through to the future. And so this quote seemed really appropriate for that. Now, I don't want to end without thanking 2 really special people that worked on this project. One was Jerry Kelly, who some of you may know. And Jerry Kelly was a sounding board. He wrote the foreword. He had some great things from his collection that I was able to use for images in the book. And he's funny. So, he was great. And then Sheila Waters, who I had worked with on another project. She lives in Pennsylvania, which is where I live. And she was willing to work with me. There's an entire introduction in the beginning on the history of italic. And so if you knew Sheila, you got it right. So it was great working with her. Unfortunately, she passed away this spring. But she had read it, but she hadn't seen the final design. So I want to thank Michael, my former classmate, and the book, I'm calling it book selection committee, but it's really the book publications committee, and the Book Club of California for assigning me this project. It was really helpful at the start of COVID, which was a very uncertain time, as you can all recall, to have a deadline in the future to work towards. And also, I couldn't travel, but I could meet a lot of people because I needed to interview a lot of people. And they were all home.
No plane tickets.
Right. They all knew how to use Zoom. And they were sick of speaking with the people in their own pod. How does somebody new to talk to? So I met a lot of good friends actually through this project, which I really, was an extra bonus for me. So thank you very much. I think we're now, one of my friends here, John McDermott, is going to speak about the special edition.
Yeah, that's really funny that you say that, Nancy, because you and I only met in person this morning.
But we've Zoomed.
Yeah, but we've been for much longer than that. We've been working on this wonderful project. So I feel you. Everything's happening over the Zoom.
Mike.
Can anybody? Is that better?
Can I suggest that you turn off the screen?
Seems to be interfering with the mic, especially when it's quiet.
Apparently, it's going to go off in a minute because my back. It's apparent. Kevin has informed me that it's the white backgrounds. So for those of you future book club speakers, don't use a white background. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say that, Kevin.
No, it's okay.
I want to thank the Book Club of California. It's so nice. I've worked on many projects for the Book Club of California, and always so thrilled when they asked me to participate, and especially in such a meaningful project and a project that has so many. I got really distracted working on this project because I would go to the index and look at all the people I know from. I'm a bookbinder, but as someone who makes something with my hands, I think of calligraphy as maybe the most direct kind of head to heart hand sort of practice that I know of. Georgiana Greenwood was my first introduction to, gave me my first introduction to calligraphy, and I believe she was a student of Lloyd Reynolds. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit. My process has nothing to do with calligraphy or typewriting, but I'm going to take you through some of the process that Nancy and I worked on together to make the special edition of this book, which is right up here. So, and it's been so nice to work with Nancy and get to know you over collaborating on people with projects is my favorite thing to do. Also really nice to work with Michael Carabetta. And thank you for your advice and input, especially on the headbands, Michael. I took your advice. I'm going to show you a real brief slideshow, since I'm the sort of cleanup batter, of how we put together very often I'm an edition binder, so very often in my practice, is the sound okay now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So very often in my practice, I will work on sort of trade editions and make special editions out of them. So it's nice, the book club doesn't often do that. So it's nice to see that they, that Nancy maybe twisted your arm into doing that this time. So when we began a project like this, we're delivered the Smythsonian text blocks, which you see up here, which were, I can't remember the name of the printer, but they're the ones who, Puritan, thank you. Yeah. Estimable printers. Delivered us that. So we take these machine sewn text blocks that the regular edition is made of, and then we do a different treatment to them. I'll take you through some steps of that. First thing we do is, this is me in my studio, is we first, so this is the sort of handwork that goes into turning a sort of trade printed text, beautifully printed text block into a more of a handmade sort of special edition. The first thing we're going to do is glue up the book, put end sheets on it, and round it. You can see me doing that with my Swedish backing hammer. I bet Corey has one of those. Get a Swedish backing hammer. Put it in our job backer between our backing boards. This is just sort of shows you all the handwork that goes into this process. Then we start backing the book. We've rounded the book, and now we're doing a process called backing, which is that's how we deal with the swell of the text block and put a shoulder on it in between those boards. So we're sort of carefully, this is a very sort of careful process, because we have to make sure we don't smash the book with our hammer in the wrong way and put big flat spots on it. So what that sort of process does is it compensates for all the swell that's created by the folds and the thread that hold this, that take these sort of, gatherings, these leaves of folded paper. And this is what we do to make this thing a more holistic object that we call a book. There I am vigorously rounding it. It's a point of pride to have the most disgusting apron you can possibly have when you work in a book bindery. Mine's not as good as my assistants, but I don't get to do as much bench work as they do anymore. So here we are in the process of getting that book into a proper shape. It's my assistant, Emily. Now we're starting to apply all the different kind of linings that we put on this. This is what, and you may all know Tom Conroy. Tom's the one who taught me how to do this process called forwarding. And this is what makes this book into a real holistic, its own sort of unit or object. So that book is lined with a piece of Japanese paper. Then we put a thin layer of starched muslin called jaconet over it. That's what Emily's doing there. And there's the rounded text blocks ready for the next step. So you can see that they're rounded. They have a nice shoulder on them. My sewn books are sometimes a little hard to round any more than that because the sewing can be very tight. So then we start preparing all our covering materials whenever, as a lot of you know, that if you've done any bookbinding, a lot of the labor that goes into these kind of projects is preparing the leather. In this case, we're pairing a piece of leather that we're going to use to make the end band and the black spine side here. So the first, we use a vegetable tan goat skin. This particular skin came from seagulls in North Carolina. So we have to do two things. We have to make it very thin, and then we have to edge pair all the edges to make all the edges go down to what we call 0. And then we're going to do two things with this piece of black leather. We first make the headbands, which is I'm sure you're very familiar with sort of machine-made headbands that go on trade books, which I just can't abide by. Nancy and I had a long discussion about it. We came to an amenable conclusion about them. They suck, and so we make our own. It's ridiculously labor-intensive, but there you go. They're really beautiful. Michael Carabetta suggested black. Thank you, Michael. And there they are applied to the text blocks. Look at that. I love a stack. And there they are. It's sometimes in this age of documenting all your work, it's really hard to work and document. Have you all noticed that? To work and document your work at the same time. So if there's some gaps in my process, that's why, because I forgot to take pictures because I was working. So this is what we've put on the spine of that book is what's called a hollow. And that's a strengthening process that attaches the rounded red leather spine there to the spine of the book while still allowing it to open properly.
John, is that the entire special run right there?
Yes, edition of 25. We are using for the spine of the book, which you see up there is a vegetable tan goat skin from Pergamena Tannery in Montgomery, New York, which is this really great American tannery that's making really, some of you might know them for their vellum, which I think they're most well known, but they're also making really good and getting better vegetable tan goat skin. And as they like to, and it's something I really like to support, they always say, raised and killed in America. And I really like to support that. We love all the British tanners and all the French ones too, and I use it all the time, but I really like to support places like Siegel and Pergamena because they're sort of like me, like a small, business trying to keep these traditions alive. So I try and this is the goat skin that we had Pergamena custom dye for this project. It's not that you'll see the color is not, it's a little more crimson-y than that. Then we start again going through this laborious process of shaping and paring down this leather so that it can transition around edges and rounded edges and head caps and all that stuff. So using both my beautiful paring knife that I got from this guy, Jeff Peachy in New York, another amazing blade, a bookbinder turned sort of amazing tool maker that we get a lot of our tools from. So we start doing some edge pairing with our knife. And once we've done that, you can see there, do that on a litho stone that I stole from my wife. And then we use another tool, a pairing machine. This one's a Brockman pairing machine. It's a British. And you basically put like a razor blade in there, and you drag it through this thing that's sort of like almost like an old wringer washing machine, and that's what helps us shave our leather down to the proper thickness. So really satisfying, really time consuming, and you can really mess up some material if you aren't careful about what you're doing. Corey's nodding her head. She knows what I'm talking about. this is what it looks like after everything is pared down and put on the cover. It's an edition, so it's not really what you would call like a fine binding. It's still a case binding, but we're applying more sort of refined techniques to it. So that's what I love about edition binding, because it's kind of this beautiful sort of liminal area between like fine binding, where you spend 6 months on one book, and edition binding, where there's like economies and sort of limitations at work. And I really like I like working in that area, and I like making multiples. So this is the cover. After we've made the cover, we're starting to do some surface treatments on the cover, so we can make everything look like we did it on purpose, and that it looks real good. That's a Kensal foil stamper, which is I own too many of these machines. Some people would say I would. Then we have a series of copper dies made, so we can start impressing recessed areas into the substrate, to the covering and substrate materials of the book, so that when we mount all the label materials, they'll seem more flush and sort of framed on the book. So this is the one that we use for the spine. That's the die. You can sort of see it mounted to the platen of my press, which it heats up. So it's foil stamping is an outgrowth of gilding. So it's like this relief printing. You're printing with rather than inks, you're printing with heat. And in this case, we're just hitting it blind. If you were doing it with foil, you would use like a heat release sort of foil or leaf. So we press this series of recessed panels into the book. Here we are on another press, pressing the recessed panels to the cover. And you can see there under the platen of the book that we've done the goal when we make it, we want it to look serene, but the sort of the steps that we take going up to that are really complicated, but we don't want you to think that was complicated. We just want we want our work we don't want any impediments to content to exist in the object that we make. So there's the finished cover. At that point, we put the book in the press and press it, and we case it in. We attach the hollow of the text block with the hollow to the spine of the case, and then we glue the end sheets down. There's the sort of naked cased in books. Then we go through a whole nother printing process where we have a series of dies made. In this case, that's a brass embossing die that's made with a CNC router. Like I was talking to John McBride earlier, like the whole technology of foil stamping plates has really changed a lot in the last few years. So we use a lot of, even though everything that I do in my shop is still like really 19th century kind of industrial revolution edition binding. The means that we have to get there are really interesting, and there's a lot of digital technology that we take advantage of. So Nancy sends me these files, and then we have these dies made, and we use that same foil stamping machine to press that, to foil stamp the spine in a matte silver. For the Thunderbolt, and I don't know what the other graphic. I don't know what the origin.
Robert Palladino's initials.
That's Palladino's initials. So at first, I think we were going to do a couple of photographs on the front of the book, wasn't it? But then Nancy, I think, made I hope it was the right. To me, it was a better choice to make the cover more graphic. And you started to use these two symbols, and we started talking about how we would get those symbols printed, and we ended up having them printed by this great screen printer in Oakland named Matt Swope. And we chose screen printing because it's so dense. And you can look at that. So we get those uncut, they're printed. That's what the uncut sheet looks like with the crop marks on there, and then we reduce it to that. My assistant Emily loves, that's her favorite thing to do in the world is cut out things with crop marks on them, and she's really good at it. She can cut it, she lifts her knife, she puts it down, you know, so she's way better than I am at it. So we reduce it to that. And that's how it all lives on the book. That is a black Japanese cloth we get it from we order it through Hiromi Paper in Los Angeles, or sometimes we also got some of it from a bindery called Campbell Logan in Minneapolis. So it's kind of a little ribbed, and it's a little bit luminous. Yes.
So about how long would it take? So each book was done individually?
No, when you're doing edition work, we try and do, when we do edition work, we try and do every step at the same time.
Oh, I see.
We've split this one up a little bit because I ran into some deadlines like tonight. But
The red spine.
that's correct.
And the covers all the same time.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, and I usually have about 3 or 4 projects in my shop at the same time. I'd say I've been in production on this book a couple of months. But if I was just doing it in my shop with nothing else going on, probably, and I don't really have any documentation of the boxes. I'd be happy, and so we made a whole, there's a book that I just talked to you about a little bit. And then we made this is that beautiful, one of the beautiful calligraphic pieces that Nancy spoke about. So there's 3 different ones, I believe, for the edition when you decide to purchase the deluxe edition that live in this folio. And then all of those go in this slipcase. Okay. Thank you. If you want to talk to me about any of the other, I'm happy to answer any details.
What are the other 2 folios?
Oh, I don't know if you have the other 2 folio. Do you have the other, you mean the other 2 pieces of artwork?
Yeah, I have them all. I can show you.
Yeah.
Slide them in the back. We have a couple minutes for some questions. Nancy, you're okay with some questions? You feeling up to it? You're
Depends on
born
what-
ready, right? Ready for
Yeah,
everything.
it depends on what the questions are.
We're not guaranteeing answers. We're
No
just-
math
We'll
questions.
just take questions. We'll just have a time for just a couple questions. So does anybody here have a question?
Why was the calligraphy program and got rid of?
Well, remember I said in the beginning about how in many colleges, if somebody was a liberal art teacher and they would suddenly show up in the art department, there would be like a nuclear explosion. So, I mean, Reed being a much more loose kind of, environment, I think that and also Reynolds having such a strong personality, that he was able to squeak in that one class, and then that class is really popular, then he got to squeak in another class. And it really always stuck in the throat of the studio artists that there was a liberal arts person teaching in the studio area. This is my take, having been a college professor at an art school, I recognize that. But I also heard inklings of that. So Reynolds was he always had to fight to keep it in there. But once he left, and then Robert Palladino came in, and the personalities are very, very different. Somebody said once that Reynolds taught a class where he wouldn't stop talking for 3 hours. And then in comes this person from a silent monastery who didn't say much, but they said we got a lot more work done in Palladino's class. So anyway, Palladino was in there for 15 years. Classes were still popular, very well attended, whatever. It happened that he lived on a farm in an area called Sandy, which you might recognize. And his wife was ill, and he had a hard time. He left the priesthood. You'll read about it in the book. Left the priesthood, married, had a kid, bought a farm, and was commuting back and forth. And they never gave him full time. This is another, if you work in academia and they don't want to give anybody full time, But they also want to give you like all this other work that you have to do. So he was having a hard time attending department meetings. And that's when you are in trouble because that's when they vote on things. So they voted to get rid of the calligraphy program in the art department during a department meeting when he wasn't there. And then he got a letter at Christmas saying from the president that you've been fired, you've been fired. So that's basically what happened. But it was very unpopular. And then they tried to start something half-hearted. I know Jackie Scarn taught for a while. Different people tried and there was no cooperation in terms of giving them studio space or anything. And so, yeah, that's how it ended. It was a big deal. I think like 70% of the students signed a petition about it and they really wanted to have it. And it's really interesting the students doing it now. This is totally no credit, no cost. And, some really get into it and they work in it.
Just speak a little to your research in the college archives. What's the scope of the Lloyd Reynolds material at the college? Is it just voluminous?
Yeah. Yeah, if you're interested, you can go on the website because they are very much documented right on the website. But Walker, what was her name? The woman who did the whole archive was a former Reynolds student, Gay Walker. Gay Walker, I think. Did you know Gay Walker?
Hey, Walker.
Yeah, yeah. And she really did a fabulous job. And then when I got there, the rare book area, the special collections, they were fabulous with letting me have things. But a lot of the former students had stuff. Like former students had those, remember that I showed that one image of the italic? Well, those were worksheets that Reynolds had produced for his classes, and people still had them. People hung on to this stuff. One thing that was really interesting for me was one of the other students who you wouldn't really connect with Lloyd Reynolds was Peter Norton, who started Norton Utilities. And I never spoke with him in person. We only communicated by mail, but he told me that he still has these banners that he did rolled up in his attic somewhere. And I kept trying to get him to find those banners, but he lives on the West Coast and East Coast, and he's back. When you have that many houses, it's hard. So anyway, there's a ton of material there. I mean, I didn't write the entire Lloyd Reynolds story because he also had this whole English teaching thing going on where he's teaching Gary, give me the names. Gary Snyder, Lou Welsh, yeah, and that whole Beat Generation thing. I mean, I couldn't.
They're notorious for
Poetry is calligraphy. It's kind
Oh,
of
it's
all-
gorgeous.
Yeah, exactly. So he was a student of us. So
And also one of the things about Reynolds' classes is that he required many of them to make a book. And they felt that because they'd had that experience that they were then able to go on and then make books later in their life. A lot of them wrote books. So.
The only one of those people left is Gary Snyder, now 19 years old.
Wow.
92.
We'll take one more question. Mike?
Yep.
Question for you, actually. Do you know if Reed College purchased a copy?
Yeah.
They should.
They haven't purchased one. Aren't they getting a copy?
They're getting one,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, Ann, that was an easy question, so you can have the last question.
If someone asked the question, who designed this book? How was the answer?
I designed it.
He wrote and designed it.
And that's a great question to end on. Congratulations, a great book written and designed. So thank you again to the author and book designer, Nancy Stock Allen, and to John Demerit, our bookbinder for the deluxe edition. And thank you for joining us here for this program at the Book Club of California. Our next program is a week from tonight, next Monday, November 21st, here in San Francisco, but it will also be streamed online via Zoom. It's an illustrated talk by Alan H. Nelson, Professor Emeritus, Department of English, University of California, Berkeley, and it's titled Adolph Sutro and the Bradshaw Library pamphlets. You can register to attend that program or any of our programs by using the links in the program's emails that you're probably getting from the Book Club of California, or you can go online to our website at bccbooks.org/programs to register for any of our events. So thank you again, everyone, for being with us. We do have the book available if you'd like to see it or purchase it. You can see me or Francine in the library. We look forward to seeing you again here at the book club or online in our Zoom community. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Have a great night.